In Whitmore Construction's office, Clara was about to discover devastating truth. What started as routine insurance paperwork became shocking when she found dashcam footage of her brother's deliberate crash. Clara wasn't typical. She'd sacrificed architecture dreams for 3 years to preserve their father's legacy, known for meticulous detail and fierce protection. When she uncovered Leo's betrayal, she didn't realize she was entering a web of theft and forgery. Clara's investigation would force an impossible choice: save her brother or everyone else. What began as paperwork would destroy and rebuild their family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Clara's phone buzzed against the construction plans spread across her desk, cutting through the late afternoon quiet of Whitmore Construction's office. Leo's name flashed on the screen, and she felt the familiar tightness that came with unexpected calls from her younger brother. "Clara, Leo's voice cracked through the speaker. Wind, traffic, distant sirens filled the background. "There's been an accident." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara's hand went instinctively to the small silver hammer pendant at her throat, Dad's gift, worn smooth by 3 years of worried rubbing since his death. "Are you hurt?" Always her first response. Always Leo's well-being before everything else. "No, I'm fine, but Clara..." The pause stretched too long. "It's the Mustang. I'm so sorry." The pendant slipped from Clara's fingers. The 1967 Shelby Cobra, Dad's pride and joy, the car he'd restored with oil-stained hands and infinite patience, left to her because he knew she understood its meaning, was more than transportation. It was memory made metal, legacy wrapped in cherry-red paint and chrome. "What happened?" "I was driving to the Henderson site to check the foundation work, and this pickup ran a red light." "You took my car to a construction site?" The words came out sharper than intended. Leo knew better. Everyone knew the Mustang was for special occasions only, for Sunday drives with Dad's old Credence tapes. "My truck's in the shop and I needed to get there before the concrete crew left." "Clara, please, I know I should have asked." "Where are you?" "Route 9, about 2 miles past Miller's Creek. The car, it's bad." 15 minutes later, Clara stood on Route 9's shoulder, watching a tow truck operator wrap chains around her father's mangled Mustang. Cherry red paint was scarred with deep gouges. The passenger side crumpled against the guardrail. The windshield had spiderwebbed into broken constellations, and the hood Dad had spent months perfecting was buckled like crushed paper. Leo sat on the concrete barrier, head in his hands. When he looked up, Clara saw the same expression from childhood after breaking something precious. Guilt mixed with defiance, as if remorse could redistribute blame. "The other driver?" Clara asked. "Left the scene. Hit and run." Leo's voice carried that particular timbre it took on when lying or admitting details. Clara had learned to recognize it during her teenage years, refined the skill during her college drug phase, perfected it during her marriage's slow disintegration. Officer Daniels, weathered and familiar with their father, approached with a clipboard. "Miss Whitmore, I'm sorry about your vehicle. Your brother gave us a statement, but without witnesses or a license plate." Clara nodded, watching Leo fidget with his wedding ring, still worn 6 months after Emma filed for divorce, spinning it in rapid, nervous rotations. "Security cameras nearby?" Clara asked. "Afraid not. Rural stretch like this. Limited coverage." Daniels glanced at the wreckage. "Your brother was lucky, though. That guardrail probably saved his life. Another few feet and he'd have gone over the embankment." Clara studied the skid marks, the crash trajectory. Something felt wrong about the pattern, but she couldn't articulate what. Maybe it was shock, the surreal nature of seeing 3 years of preservation reduced to twisted metal. "Tow it to Morrison's auto," Clara told the operator, ignoring Leo's surprised look. Morrison's was expensive, but specialized in classic restoration. Everyone else would consider the Mustang totaled. "Clara, the insurance money would probably cover a good used car."
"Something practical." She looked at him then, really looked. His clothes were pristine. No wrinkles or stains, no signs of airbag deployment or crash injuries. His hair was perfectly in place. I'm not ready to give up on it yet. The truth was, she wasn't ready to give up on many things. Not the car, not Dad's business, not the fragile hope that her family could weather this latest crisis. But watching Leo avoid her eyes, Clara felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling like a lead blanket. After police finished their report and the tow truck disappeared with its cargo, Clara and Leo stood alone on the empty highway. The setting sun painted asphalt in amber and gold, and Clara could almost imagine her father beside them, his calloused hand on her shoulder, offering quiet wisdom about accepting what couldn't be changed. "I'll handle the insurance claim," Clara said finally. "You focus on getting your truck fixed and staying current with Henderson." Leo nodded, relief flickering across his features. "Thank you. I know this isn't what you needed right now." Walking back to Clara's practical Honda, the reliable sedan she drove to job sites and meetings, Clara made a mental note to document everything thoroughly for insurance. Photos, receipts, maintenance records. The adjuster would want proof of the Mustang's value, evidence of the restoration work that had transformed Dad's weekend project into automotive art. She had no way of knowing her methodical documentation would soon reveal secrets making the car's loss seem insignificant. No way of knowing hidden in the Mustang's systems was a recording that would shatter her understanding of the brother she'd spent a lifetime protecting. For now, there was only loss and the familiar burden of holding her family together, one crisis at a time. Clara's kitchen table had become a makeshift command center by 8 that evening. Insurance forms spread across the oak surface like battle plans, her laptop humming quietly beside stacks of receipts and maintenance records dating back to her father's first restoration efforts. The Mustang's registration, title, and appraisal documents formed neat piles, each one a testament to the car's value that now felt both crucial and meaningless. She'd always been methodical about record-keeping, a trait inherited from her father and sharpened by years of managing construction projects where a misplaced invoice could cost thousands. Tonight, that precision felt like armor against the chaos of the day's events. The insurance company's website glowed on her laptop screen, the claim form half completed. Vehicle, make, model, year, easy enough. Circumstances of loss, that's where things got complicated. Clara's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered how to describe what had happened. Leo's version, the official version, painted him as the victim of a hit-and-run driver. But something about the skid marks, about his pristine appearance at the scene, nagged at her like a splinter under the skin. She reached for her phone to call Morrison's Auto, planning to arrange a time to photograph the damage for the claim. Tom Morrison answered on the second ring, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of 40 years in the auto repair business. "Clara, sorry about your dad's car. Hell of a thing." "Thanks, Tom. I need to come by tomorrow to document the damage for insurance. Is that possible?" "Of course. But I should mention, found something interesting when we were unloading her. Your dashcam was still powered. Little red light blinking away in all that mess." Clara's pen stopped moving across the insurance form. "Dashcam?" "Yeah, one of those small units mounted behind the rearview mirror. Probably been there so long you forgot about it. Quality unit, too. Looks like it was still recording when we pulled the car off the truck." The memory surfaced slowly. Dad had installed the camera 2 years before his death, worried about liability issues when he occasionally lent the car to friends for special occasions. Clara had forgotten about it entirely after the funeral, another small detail lost in the overwhelming process of settling his estate. "Can you remove the memory card?" Clara asked. "Already did. Figured you'd want it for insurance purposes. Pretty banged up, but these things are built tough." Clara was already reaching for her car keys. "I'll be right there." The drive to Morrison's took 12 minutes through empty rural roads. The auto shop sat in darkness except for the security lights casting harsh shadows across the lot filled with wounded vehicles. Tom met her at the side door, a small SD card held carefully between oil-stained fingers. Might not be readable, but worth a shot. Back home, Clara inserted the memory card into her laptop with trembling hands. The computer chimed as it recognized the device, and a folder appeared containing dozens of video files organized by date and time. She scrolled to yesterday's date, finding 3 files from the afternoon. The first 2 showed routine driving, Leo backing out of the Whitmore Construction lot, navigating through town traffic. The third file was timestamped 4:23 p.m., just minutes before he'd called.
Clara clicked play. The interior of the Mustang filled her screen, the familiar tan leather seats and Dad's fuzzy dice hanging from the mirror, creating an intimacy that made her chest tighten. Leo appeared in the driver's seat, his profile visible as he drove along Route 9. For the first minute, everything seemed normal, just her brother driving her father's car with careful attention to the road. Then, his phone rang. "Yeah, it's me." Leo's voice came through her laptop speakers, clear and close. He was using the car's Bluetooth system, his conversation being recorded along with everything else. "No, I told you I need more time." Clara leaned closer to the screen, watching Leo's knuckles whiten as his grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Look, I understand you're not running a charity here, but the money's coming. I just need until Friday." Leo's voice carried a desperation Clara had never heard before, high and strained. "My sister doesn't know anything about this. She can't know." The person on the other end said something Clara couldn't hear, but Leo's response made her blood freeze. "No, you don't understand. She'd kill me if she found out about the loans, about the forged signatures. She trusts me with the business accounts, with Mom's finances. If she knew I'd been—" His voice trailed off, then strengthened with desperate determination. "I'm going to fix this. I have a plan, but I need you to back off until I can make it work." On screen, Leo pulled the car onto the shoulder, his hands shaking as he put it in park. Clara watched her brother's face crumple, watched him become someone she didn't recognize. "I know what I owe you. $200,000 plus interest, but threatening my family isn't going to get you paid faster." He paused, listening. "What do you mean? Make it look good?" Clara's hand moved to her mouth as understanding began to dawn. "I can't just— Jesus Christ, you want me to—" Leo looked around the empty road, his eyes wild. "If I do this, if I stage this thing, you'll give me until Friday to get you the money?" The conversation continued for another minute, but Clara barely heard it. She watched her brother disconnect the call, sit in silence for 30 seconds, then deliberately shift the car into drive. She watched him accelerate toward the guardrail with purpose, steering into the collision with the calculated precision of someone who'd made peace with what he had to do. The impact cut the feed. Clara slammed the laptop shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. The kitchen felt too small, too warm, the familiar space suddenly foreign. Leo hadn't been the victim of a hit and run. He'd deliberately crashed their father's car to destroy evidence, to buy himself time with people who made threats against their family. The question that terrified her most wasn't what Leo had done, but what he'd been hiding in the glove compartment that was worth destroying their father's legacy to conceal. Clara didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table until dawn, staring at the closed laptop while her mind churned through possibilities. What could Leo have been hiding that was worth destroying Dad's Mustang? What evidence had been in that glove compartment that scared him enough to orchestrate such an elaborate deception? By 6 a.m., she was dressed and driving through the empty streets toward Whitmore Construction's office. The building sat in industrial quiet, its windows dark except for the security lights casting geometric shadows across the parking lot. Clara had her own key, of course. She'd been co-managing the business since Dad's heart attack, but using it at this hour felt like trespassing. The office smelled of coffee and sawdust, familiar scents that usually comforted her. Today, they felt accusatory, as if the building itself knew she was here to investigate family secrets. Clara flipped on the lights and headed straight for the filing cabinets that housed their financial records. She started with the obvious places. Leo managed most of our accounts payable and handled client payments, a responsibility he'd taken on after demonstrating natural sales ability in his early 20s. Clara focused on the bigger picture: project oversight, client relations, long-term planning. The division of labor had worked well for 3 years, allowing them to preserve Dad's business while playing to their individual strengths. Now, that trust felt naive. The first irregularity appeared in March's bank statements, a transfer of $8,000 to an account Clara didn't recognize, coded as equipment rental. She pulled the corresponding invoices, finding a receipt for a concrete mixer rental that should have cost half that amount. When she called the rental company, they confirmed the actual charge, $4,200. Someone had pocketed the difference. Clara's hand shook as she pulled more files. APR showed similar discrepancies: inflated invoices, mysterious transfers, money flowing out of Whitmore Construction's accounts like blood from an open wound. The amounts weren't huge individually, but they added up quickly. $5,000 here, $3,000 there, always small enough to avoid triggering obvious red flags. She found the forged signatures in Eleanor's personal files. Clara kept copies of important documents for her mother, helping manage the medical appointments and financial decisions that were becoming increasingly difficult for Eleanor to handle alone.
The loan applications were buried beneath Medicare forms and prescription receipts, official-looking documents from Riverside Community Bank that made Clara's stomach drop. Home equity loans against Eleanor's house, 2 of them, totaling $90,000. The signatures looked perfect, Eleanor's careful script with its distinctive flourishes, exactly as it appeared on checks and legal documents. But Clara knew her mother hadn't applied for these loans. Eleanor had mentioned wanting to pay off the house completely, not borrow against it. These applications were dated during periods when Eleanor's memory had been particularly foggy, days when she'd struggled to remember appointments or repeat conversations from hours before. Clara pulled up the bank's website and logged into Eleanor's account using the password she'd helped her mother set up. The loan funds had been deposited and immediately transferred out, moved through a series of smaller transactions that eventually led to accounts Clara couldn't access. Her phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Running late today. Can you handle the Morrison site inspection?" The casual normalcy of the message felt obscene. Clara stared at the screen, wondering how he could text about work schedules when he'd stolen nearly $200,000 from their family business and forged their mother's signature on legal documents. How he could look her in the eye yesterday and accept her sympathy for the accident that had destroyed Dad's car. Clara called Riverside Community Bank, identifying herself as Eleanor's designated financial representative. The loan officer, a woman named Patricia Hernandez, pulled up the account with professional efficiency. "The applications were processed normally," Patricia explained. "Your mother came in personally for both loans, provided all necessary documentation. Is there a problem? What did she look like when she came in?" A pause. "I'm sorry?" "My mother has early-stage dementia. On her bad days, she can seem confused or disoriented. Did you notice anything unusual about her behavior during these appointments?" Another pause, longer this time. "Ms. Whitmore, I should clarify, your mother didn't handle these applications personally. Her son Leo managed everything. He had power of attorney documentation and medical records explaining her condition. We were actually impressed by how well he was handling her affairs." Clara's free hand clenched into a fist. Leo had never been granted power of attorney. That was another forgery, another lie in a web of deception that seemed to grow more complex by the hour. "I need copies of all documentation related to these loans." "Of course, though I should mention, if there are concerns about the legitimacy of these transactions, you might want to speak with our fraud investigation department." After hanging up, Clara sat alone in the office as morning light crept through the windows. The evidence spread across her desk told a story she didn't want to believe. Systematic theft, elder abuse, document forgery. Leo hadn't just stolen money, he'd exploited her mother's illness, using Eleanor's trust and confusion to steal her home's equity. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The phone in the glove compartment yesterday, he'd been talking to someone he owed money to.
$200,000 plus interest. Gambling debts, most likely, given what Emma had hinted at during their divorce proceedings. Leo had been feeding his addiction with family money, and when that wasn't enough, he'd turned to loan sharks who made threats serious enough to drive him to destroy evidence rather than face exposure. Clara thought about Eleanor, trusting and vulnerable, signing documents she didn't understand while her son smiled and assured her everything was for her own good. She thought about their father, who'd built this business through honest work and careful planning, never imagining his legacy would be stolen by his own son. The weight of knowledge settled on her shoulders like concrete. She couldn't confront Leo directly. He'd already proven he would lie, manipulate, even stage accidents to cover his tracks. But she couldn't let this continue either, couldn't watch him destroy what remained of their family's stability to feed his addiction. Clara looked at her phone, considering her options. She needed help, needed someone outside the immediate crisis who could provide perspective on what felt like an impossible situation. Someone who would understand the stakes, but wouldn't let family loyalty cloud their judgment about what needed to be done. Clara stared at the evidence scattered across her desk until the numbers blurred together. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting harsh rectangles of light across the financial documents that spelled out Leo's betrayal in black and white. She needed perspective, needed someone who could see the situation without the emotional weight that made her question every instinct. She scrolled through her phone contacts until she found Caleb's number. Her youngest brother had distanced himself from family drama years ago, choosing art school in Portland over the family business, calling only on holidays and birthdays. Part of Clara had always resented his escape, the way he'd abandoned them to pursue his creative dreams, while she'd sacrificed her architecture career to keep Dad's legacy alive. Now, that distance felt like exactly what she needed. The phone rang 4 times before Caleb's familiar voice answered, cautious and slightly surprised. "Clara, everything okay?" "Not really." Clara's voice cracked despite her efforts to stay composed. "I need to talk to someone, and you're the only person I know who isn't part of this mess." "What kind of mess?"
Caleb's tone shifted, the casual greeting replaced by genuine concern. "Is Mom okay?" Clara found herself crying then, the weight of the past 18 hours finally breaking through her carefully maintained control. "Mom's fine, physically, but Caleb, Leo's... God, I don't even know where to start." It took 20 minutes to explain everything. The crash, the dashcam footage, the forged documents, the stolen money. Caleb listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly letting Clara pour out the story that had been burning inside her since she'd watched Leo deliberately crash their father's car. "Jesus Christ," Caleb said when she finished. $200,000? Plus whatever he owes to whoever he was talking to on that phone call. They were threatening our family, Caleb. That's why he staged the crash, to buy time with people dangerous enough to make him destroy Dad's car rather than face them. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, and Clara could hear the distant sounds of Portland traffic through the phone. "You know, this explains some things that never made sense." "What do you mean?" "Remember when Leo and Emma started having problems? Right around the time I graduated? She called me once, completely out of the blue, asking if I'd noticed any changes in Leo's behavior." Caleb's voice carried the weight of old guilt. She seemed desperate, like she was trying to find someone who would validate what she was seeing. But I was so focused on getting out of town, on starting my own life, that I brushed her off, told her Leo had always been impulsive. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What kind of changes was she talking about? Mood swings? Secretiveness, money disappearing from their accounts? She said he'd started working late all the time, but when she'd call the office, you'd tell her he'd left hours earlier. Caleb paused. "I think she was trying to tell me he was gambling, but I didn't want to hear it. None of us wanted to admit that Leo, golden boy Leo, might have serious problems." The conversation shifted something in Clara's understanding. She'd always seen Leo's struggles as recent developments, consequences of his divorce and the stress of running the business.
But if Emma had been noticing problems 3 years ago, then the gambling addiction had deeper roots than Clara had realized. I need to talk to Emma. That's probably smart. But Clara, Caleb's voice carried a gravity she rarely heard from her artistic younger brother. You can't protect Leo from this. I know that's what you're thinking. How to fix this without destroying him completely. But he's been lying to you for years, stealing from Mom, risking our entire family security. At some point, protecting him becomes enabling him. After hanging up with Caleb, Clara called Emma directly. Leo's ex-wife agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the hospital where she worked, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. But her eyes were sharp, alert in the way of someone who'd learned to function on minimal sleep and maximum stress. "You found out," Emma said simply as Clara sat down across from her. "How did you—" Because that's what Leo does when he's cornered. He creates a crisis big enough to distract from whatever he's been hiding. Emma stirred her coffee mechanically. "I've been waiting for this call since the divorce was finalized." Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "You knew he was stealing?" "I suspected. Money would disappear from our joint account, always with explanations that almost made sense. Emergency repairs on job sites, unexpected equipment costs, clients who paid late. Leo's always been good at making lies sound reasonable." Clara's laugh held no humor. "The gambling started small. Poker nights with friends, weekend trips to the casino. But addicts always escalate. Why didn't you tell me?" Emma's expression softened with something like pity. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. Clara, you've been covering for Leo since you were kids."
Making excuses for his mistakes, cleaning up his messes, protecting him from consequences. Your whole identity is built around being the responsible one who holds the family together. The words stung because they rang true. Clara thought about all the times she'd smoothed over Leo's forgotten deadlines, his canceled appointments, his promises that never materialized into action. She'd told herself she was being supportive, but maybe she'd been enabling his irresponsibility all along. "The threats he mentioned on the phone?" Clara said. "How serious are they?" Emma's face went pale. "Serious enough that I changed our daughter's school and moved to a different apartment. Leo owes money to people who don't accept bankruptcy or payment plans. They view family members as collateral." Clara felt the last of her protective instincts toward Leo crumble. He hadn't just stolen money or forged documents. He'd put everyone they loved at risk, including a 6-year-old girl who deserved better than a father whose addiction made her a target. "I kept hoping he'd hit bottom, that he'd lose enough to scare himself straight. But there is no bottom for addicts like Leo. There's just deeper holes and bigger lies." As Clara drove back to the office, Emma's words echoed in her mind. The difference between love and enabling. The courage required to let someone face consequences instead of rescuing them from their own choices. She'd spent so many years being the family's protector that she'd never learned how to protect the family from one of its own members. Her phone buzzed with another text from Leo. "Everything okay? You've been quiet today." Clara stared at the message, seeing it now for what it was, a probe. Leo checking to see if she suspected anything. The casual tone that had seemed normal hours ago now felt calculated, manipulative. She didn't respond. Instead, she thought about tomorrow's insurance investigation, about Ethan Whitmore arriving to examine the crash site with professional eyes that might notice the same inconsistencies that had bothered her. She thought about the evidence sitting in her desk drawer, about the choice she was going to have to make between protecting Leo and protecting everyone else. The time for half measures and family loyalty was running out. Clara's phone remained silent on her desk, Leo's unanswered text glowing like an accusation. She'd been staring at it for 10 minutes when the office door chimed, announcing the arrival of someone who would complicate everything further. Ethan Whitmore stood in the doorway, a lean man in his 40s,
with the weathered face of someone who'd spent years investigating other people's disasters. Ethan hadn't seen her since Dad's funeral, where he'd offered awkward condolences and left early, but she recognized the careful way he carried himself, like someone perpetually assessing his surroundings for inconsistencies. "Clara," he nodded, removing his insurance company cap. "Sorry about your car. Hell of a thing." "Ethan." She closed the financial files she'd been reviewing, sliding them into her desk drawer with practiced casualness. "I wasn't expecting you personally. Figured they'd send someone from the local office." "They were going to, but when I saw the Whitmore name come across my desk," he shrugged. The gesture carried decades of family complications. "Thought it might be easier to keep it in the family. Professional courtesy and all." The irony wasn't lost on Clara. Ethan had been ostracized from family gatherings after choosing what Dad had called the insurance game over honest work. Now he was here to investigate the very dishonesty that was tearing their family apart, and she was the only one who knew it. "I need to examine the crash site first," Ethan said, pulling out a tablet. "Then we'll go over the details of what happened. Routine stuff, but the company likes documentation." Clara felt her stomach clench. She'd hoped for an anonymous adjuster, someone who would accept Leo's story and process the claim without looking too closely at the details. Ethan's trained eyes would notice the same inconsistencies that had bothered her. The wrong angle of impact, the suspicious lack of debris from a second vehicle. "Of course," she managed. "I can drive out there with you." The drive to Route 9 passed in uncomfortable silence, both of them navigating the unspoken tension that had defined their family relationships for years. Ethan had been Uncle Robert's boy, the nephew who'd chosen corporate work over the family trades that had built their modest prosperity. His success in insurance had been seen as a betrayal, his investigative skills used to deny claims for people like them. At the crash site, Ethan worked methodically, photographing skid marks and measuring angles with professional precision. Clara watched him frown at the guardrail damage, saw him crouch beside the asphalt to examine the tire tracks more closely. "Something's not adding up," Ethan said, not looking at her. "The skid pattern doesn't match a typical collision avoidance scenario, and there's no debris from a second vehicle. No paint transfer, no glass, nothing to indicate another car was involved." Clara's mouth dried. "What are you saying?"
"I'm saying this looks like a single vehicle accident. Driver error, maybe, medical emergency, mechanical failure." Ethan stood, brushing dust from his knees. "But your brother was very specific about being hit by a pickup truck." Before Clara could respond, her phone rang. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen, and Clara felt a spike of panic. Her mother rarely called during business hours, usually forgetting that Clara worked away from home. "Mom? Everything okay?" "Clara, dear, there's a man here who says he's family. Harold something? He wants to talk about the business, but I can't remember if your father had any meetings scheduled." Eleanor's voice carried the confused quality it took on during her bad days, when the present blurred with memories from decades past. Clara's heart sank. Harold Whitmore, Dad's brother, the uncle who'd been bought out of the original business 25 years ago after a bitter dispute over expansion plans. If he was approaching Eleanor directly, it meant he sensed weakness, an opportunity to reclaim what he'd lost. "Don't sign anything, Mom. I'll be right there." Ethan looked up from his notes. "Harold's making a move?" "Apparently." Clara started walking back toward her car. "We'll have to finish this later." "Clara." Ethan's voice stopped her. "Whatever's going on here, whatever your brother's mixed up in, it's going to come out. Insurance fraud, family business problems, these things don't stay buried." She met his eyes and saw something unexpected there. Not the cold professionalism she'd expected, but genuine concern. "Are you warning me or threatening me?" "I'm telling you that I've seen families destroy themselves trying to protect someone who can't be protected. Sometimes the kindest thing is to stop covering up and let the truth surface before more damage gets done." The drive to Eleanor's house took 15 minutes through familiar neighborhoods that felt increasingly foreign. Clara's phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from Marcus asking about missing supply orders, missed calls from Leo, a voicemail from Tom Morrison saying someone had been asking questions about the Mustang's condition before the crash. At Eleanor's house, Clara found Harold sitting in Dad's old chair, papers spread across the coffee table, while her mother looked on with confused politeness. Harold had aged since the funeral, his hair fully gray now, his face carrying the satisfied roundness of financial success. But his eyes were sharp, predatory. "Clara, good to see you." Harold rose with false warmth. "Your mother and I were just discussing some options for the business, given the recent difficulties." "What difficulties?" Clara kept her voice level, despite the anger building in her chest. "Well, the insurance claims, the missed payments to suppliers, the general word around town that things are tight." Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Eleanor mentioned Leo has been under some stress lately. Sometimes it's better to partner with family than struggle alone." Clara looked at her mother, who was fidgeting with her wedding ring in the way that meant she was fighting confusion. "Mom, did you invite Harold here?" I think so. He called about your father, about the business papers that need signing." Eleanor's voice trailed off uncertainly. "There are so many papers lately." The realization hit Clara like a physical blow. Harold wasn't just sensing weakness. He knew about the financial problems, possibly even about Leo's theft. Someone had been feeding him information, and Clara had a sick feeling she knew who. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. "Clara, can we talk? Something's wrong with the Henderson project payments, and I think you need to know about it." Standing in her childhood living room, watching Harold shuffle through papers that would dissolve her father's legacy, while her mother struggled to understand what was happening, Clara felt the walls closing in. External pressures were mounting from every direction. Ethan's investigation, Harold's opportunistic maneuvers, Marcus's growing awareness of the financial irregularities, Eleanor's increasing vulnerability.
At the center of it all was Leo, whose desperation had created a crisis that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. Clara realized she was out of time for careful planning, for protecting feelings or preserving relationships. The truth was going to surface whether she guided it or not, and her only choice now was whether to have some control over how it happened. She thought about Emma's words, the difference between love and enabling, between protection and destruction. Looking at her confused mother and predatory uncle, Clara knew the moment for family loyalty had passed. It was time to choose between Leo and everyone else. The question was whether she had the courage to make that choice before it was made for her. Clara waited until 9 that evening, after Harold had left with promises to think over his generous offer, and Eleanor had been settled with her medications and evening routine. The family house felt hollow in the growing darkness, filled with the ghosts of better times when Sunday dinners brought them all together, and secrets hadn't yet poisoned the spaces between them. Leo's truck pulled into the driveway just as Clara was beginning to think he wouldn't show up. She'd texted him an hour earlier with a simple message. "Need to talk. Mom's house. Important." No explanation, no hint of what was coming, just the kind of summons that had worked since childhood when the responsible older sister needed to discuss family business. He looked exhausted when he walked through the front door, his work clothes wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. For a moment, Clara felt the familiar tug of protective instinct, the urge to smooth things over, to find excuses for whatever had put those dark circles under his eyes. Then she remembered the Dashcam footage, the forged signatures, the $200,000 stolen from their family's future. "Clara, what's this about?" Leo glanced around the living room, noting the absence of their mother. "Where's Mom?" "Asleep. We need privacy for this conversation." Clara gestured toward the couch, the same one they'd grown up watching cartoons and doing homework. "Sit down, Leo." Something in her tone made him wary. The easy charm he wore like armor flickered, replaced with the guarded expression of someone who'd grown used to expecting trouble. "Okay, you're scaring me a little bit here. What's going on?" Clara pulled out her laptop and set it on the coffee table between them. "I found the Dashcam footage from the crash."
The color drained from Leo's face so quickly that Clara thought he might faint. His hands gripped the couch cushions, knuckles white against the faded fabric. "I don't know what you think you saw. I saw you talking to someone about gambling debts, about forged signatures, about needing time to get them $200,000. Clara's voice stayed level despite the tremor she felt building in her chest. "I watched you deliberately crash Dad's car, Leo." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Leo's face cycled through emotions: panic, calculation, desperate hope that he could somehow talk his way out of this. "You don't understand the whole situation," he said finally. "It's not what it looks like." "Then explain it to me." Leo ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar from childhood that Clara felt a stab of grief for the brother she thought she knew. "The gambling. It started small. Just poker games with the crew after work, weekend trips to the casino with Emma, recreational stuff. When did recreational become $200,000 in debt? It escalated after Emma left." Leo's voice cracked. "I was angry, hurt, trying to prove I could fix everything if I just hit the right numbers. But the more I lost, the more I needed to win to break even." Clara thought about Emma's words. There is no bottom for addicts like Leo. "So you started stealing from the business." "Borrowing." The correction came quickly, desperately. "I was always planning to pay it back. Every time I took money, I had a system, a sure thing that would let me return it with interest." "And Mom's house?" Leo's shoulders sagged. "The business accounts weren't enough. I needed more capital to really turn things around, and Mom's equity was just sitting there. She doesn't even understand what she's signing anyway half the time."
The casual cruelty of the statement hit Clara like a slap. "You exploited her illness." "I protected her from having to make difficult decisions." Leo's voice rose, defensive anger replacing guilty shame. "Do you think she wants to know that her son is in debt to people who break legs for late payments? Do you think she wants to understand that the business Dad built is failing because of my mistakes? The business is failing because you've been stealing from it for 3 years." Clara kept her voice steady, despite the rage building inside her. "And now Harold's circling like a vulture because he knows we're vulnerable?" Leo's head snapped up. "What do you mean, Harold knows?" "He was here today, making Mom an offer to buy out her share. Somehow he's aware of our financial problems." Clara watched Leo's face carefully. "You wouldn't happen to know how he got that information, would you?" The guilt that flashed across Leo's features told her everything. "I needed options. If Harold bought in as a partner, there would be enough cash flow to cover the missing money and pay off my debts." Clara felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, exactly, but her faith in the possibility that Leo could be saved from himself. "You're planning to sell Dad's business to cover your gambling debts." "I'm planning to save it." Leo stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You think I want this? You think I enjoy lying to you, to Mom, to everyone? I'm drowning here, Clara. Every day I wake up hoping I can find a way to fix this before anyone gets hurt. People are already hurt, Leo. Mom's house is at risk. The business is hemorrhaging money. Emma had to move because of threats from your creditors." Clara closed the laptop, the gesture final. "And you destroyed Dad's car, the one thing he left specifically for me, to buy yourself more time to dig us deeper into this hole." Leo turned from the window, and Clara saw tears streaming down his face. For a moment, he looked like the little brother who used to come to her room during thunderstorms, scared and seeking comfort. "I can fix this. Give me 1 more week. I have a plan." "What plan?" "There's a private game this weekend. High stakes, but I know the players. I can win back enough to clear my debts and return what I took from the business." Leo's voice gained strength as he spoke, as if saying the words made them true. "One good night and this whole nightmare goes away." Clara stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the depth of his self-deception. He genuinely believed he could gamble his way out of a hole created by gambling. The logic was so fundamentally broken that she wondered how she'd missed it for so long. "Leo, you need help. Professional help. Rehab, therapy, whatever it takes." Clara stood, moving toward him with careful steps. But first, you need to confess to Mom and return whatever money you can access. We'll figure out how to handle the rest. I can't. The words came out flat, final. If I confess now before I fix this, it destroys everything. Mom's health, the business, our family's reputation. Give me 1 week to make this right. Clara looked into her brother's eyes and saw the same desperate certainty that had driven him to crash their father's car. He would promise anything, agree to any terms, but he would never voluntarily stop the behavior that was destroying them all. If you don't confess by tomorrow morning, I will. Leo's face went white. You wouldn't destroy your own brother. I won't let you destroy our family.
Clara moved toward the door, her decision crystallizing with each step. You have until 9 a.m. to do the right thing. After that, I do it for you. She left him standing in their childhood living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life built on trust and mutual support. As she drove home through empty streets, Clara felt the weight of what was coming, the conversations that would shatter Eleanor's world, the phone calls that would bring authorities into their lives, the moment when she would have to choose her family's survival over her brother's protection. Behind her, Leo remained in the house where they'd grown up, probably already calculating odds and planning his next move. Clara had given him a chance to save himself, but she knew with cold certainty that he wouldn't take it. The only question now was whether she would have the strength to follow through on her ultimatum when morning came. Clara's phone remained silent at 9:05 a.m. She sat in her car outside Eleanor's house, watching the minutes tick by on her dashboard clock, giving Leo every possible chance to do the right thing. At 9:15, she saw his truck pull out of the construction company lot through her rearview mirror, heading in the opposite direction, running away from the confrontation she'd demanded. The coward's path, but entirely predictable. Clara's hands shook as she gathered the manila folder containing copies of the financial documents, the printed screenshots from the Dashcam footage, and the loan applications bearing Eleanor's forged signature. The weight of the evidence felt disproportionate to its physical mass, as if the papers themselves understood they were about to detonate the careful structure of her family's life. Eleanor answered the door in her gardening clothes, soil still clinging to her fingers from the morning's work in her flower beds. On her good days, Mom maintained the same routines she'd followed for 30 years. Coffee at sunrise, garden work before the heat set in, and afternoon tea while watching her stories on television. Today appeared to be one of those good days, which made what Clara had to do both easier and infinitely more cruel. "Clara, sweetheart, you're early. Is everything all right?" Eleanor's eyes carried the sharp clarity that came and went like weather patterns, unpredictable but unmistakable when present. "Mom, we need to talk. It's about Leo, about the business." Clara stepped inside, noting the neat stacks of mail on the hall table, the carefully organized medication schedule magneted to the refrigerator. Eleanor's lucid moments were becoming more precious as they grew rarer. "Is your mind clear today? Can you understand complicated things?" Eleanor studied her daughter's face with the intuition of 30 years of motherhood. "Clear enough to know you're about to tell me something that will break my heart." They sat at the kitchen table where Clara had eaten countless bowls of cereal before school, where homework had been completed and family decisions discussed. The familiar surroundings made the conversation feel surreal, as if she were about to confess childhood misbehavior rather than expose her brother's systematic betrayal. "Leo's been stealing money from the business," Clara said simply. "A lot of money. And he's forged your signature on loan documents to borrow against your house." Eleanor's face went very still. "Show me." Clara spread the evidence across the table methodically. Bank statements with highlighted discrepancies, forged loan applications, screenshots from the dashcam footage that showed Leo's deliberate crash. She talked Eleanor through each piece of evidence, watching her mother's expression shift from confusion to understanding to a devastating kind of recognition. "How much?" Eleanor's voice was steady, but Clara could see her hands trembling. "Close to $200,000 total. Maybe more. I haven't finished going through everything." Eleanor picked up one of the forged loan documents, studying her own signature with the careful attention of someone who'd signed thousands of checks and contracts over decades of running a business. "This isn't how I write my W's. The loops are too round." The observation was so precise, so Eleanor, that Clara felt tears building behind her eyes. Even in her confusion, their mother remained sharp about the details that mattered. "The crash yesterday wasn't an accident, Leo. He staged it to destroy evidence. He owes money to dangerous people, Mom, people who threaten families. Eleanor set down the loan document and looked directly at Clara. You want my permission to turn him in. I want your permission to save what's left of our family. Before Eleanor could respond, the front door opened. Clara heard Ethan's voice calling out, then his footsteps in the hallway. She'd called him an hour earlier, asking him to come for what she had described as a family meeting about the insurance claim. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, took in the scene, the documents spread across the table, Eleanor's pale face, Clara's defensive posture, and sank heavily into an empty chair. How bad is it? Clara pushed copies of the evidence toward him. Insurance fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, forgery. Take your pick. Ethan reviewed the documents with professional efficiency, his expression growing more grim with each page. Clara, this isn't just family business anymore. If I don't report this, I'm complicit in fraud. My job, my license, everything I've built. I know. Clara's voice was steady, despite the chaos in her chest.
That's why I called you here. I'm not asking you to cover anything up. I'm asking you to help us figure out how to handle this properly. Eleanor spoke into the silence that followed. Where's Leo now? I don't know. He was supposed to confess this morning, but he ran instead. Clara looked at her mother's face, seeing decades of worry crystallizing into resigned understanding. Mom, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted for your family. Eleanor reached across the table and took Clara's hand. Your father always said Leo was too charming for his own good. That charm would either make him rich or destroy him. She squeezed Clara's fingers. I think we both know which way it went. The sound of another car in the driveway interrupted them. Through the kitchen window, Clara saw Harold's silver Cadillac pulling up behind her Honda. Perfect timing, as if he'd been waiting for exactly this moment of family crisis. Did you call him? Clara asked Ethan. No, but if he's been getting information from Leo about the business troubles, Ethan left the implication hanging. Harold knocked once before letting himself in, his presumptuous familiarity grating against Clara's already raw nerves. He appeared in the kitchen with the satisfied expression of a man who smelled opportunity in other people's disasters. Eleanor, Clara, Ethan. He nodded to each of them before his eyes found the documents on the table. I see we're having the conversation I've been expecting. You knew, Clara said flatly. I suspected. Leo's been consulting with me about options for the business. Hypothetical scenarios, he called them. Harold pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited. Of course, now that the situation is clearer, my offer becomes more relevant. Eleanor's voice carried a steel that reminded Clara of their father. Your offer? To buy out your share of the business at a fair price, absorb the debts, protect the family name from scandal. Harold's tone was reasonable, almost kind. Given the circumstances, it might be the cleanest solution for everyone. Including Leo? Clara asked. That depends on how cooperative everyone wants to be about moving forward rather than dwelling on past mistakes. The implication was clear. Harold's buyout came with conditions about not pressing charges, about keeping family business private, protection for Leo in exchange for everything their father had built. Clara looked around the table at the faces of her family. Eleanor, struggling with the betrayal of a son she'd trusted. Ethan, caught between professional obligations and family loyalty. Harold, calculating how much profit he could extract from their pain. At the center of it all was Leo's absence, the empty space where the person who'd caused this destruction should have been sitting. No deal, Clara said quietly. Harold's eyebrows rose. I don't think you understand the full implications. I understand that my brother stole money, forged documents, and put our entire family at risk to feed his gambling addiction. Clara's voice grew stronger with each word. I understand that covering this up won't help him get better, and it sure as hell won't protect the next family he decides to exploit. Eleanor squeezed Clara's hand again. Call the police.
The simple words carried the weight of a lifetime of difficult decisions, of a woman who'd built a business, raised children, and buried a husband while never backing down from what needed to be done. Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'll call my supervisor first, then the authorities. Clara, you should know, once this starts, there's no taking it back." Clara looked at the evidence spread across her childhood kitchen table, thought about Leo somewhere in town, probably planning his next desperate move, and felt something settle in her chest. The choice between protecting Leo and protecting everyone else had never really been a choice at all. Make the calls. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, indifferent to the family that was about to shatter completely. But inside Eleanor's kitchen, surrounded by the weight of necessary decisions and the wreckage of misplaced trust, Clara finally understood the difference between love and accountability. It was a lesson that would cost them everything, but might be the only way to save what mattered most.
The police arrived within an hour, their presence transforming Eleanor's quiet kitchen into something that felt like a crime scene. Detective Rachel Morrison, no relation to Tom from the auto shop, was a compact woman with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades untangling family secrets. She listened to Clara's explanation while taking careful notes, occasionally asking for clarification about dates or amounts. "We'll need to interview your brother," Detective Morrison said, closing her notebook. "Is he at work today?" Clara tried calling Leo's phone while the detective waited. Straight to voicemail. She called the construction office, but Marcus answered with confusion in his voice. He never showed up this morning, left a message saying he had a family emergency and would be out for a few days. Marcus paused. "Clara, is everything okay? People are starting to ask questions about some of the supply orders, and I found invoices that don't match what we actually received." "We'll talk later, Marcus. If Leo contacts you, call me immediately." Detective Morrison was already on her radio, putting out a BOLO for Leo's truck. "Given the amount of money involved and the potential flight risk, we need to move quickly. Is there anywhere he might go? Friends, relatives, out of state?" Clara thought about Leo's isolation in recent months, how his gambling had cost him most of his friendships and strained every family relationship. "I don't think he has anywhere to run." That assumption proved wrong within the hour. Eleanor's bank called to report suspicious activity on her account. Someone with access to her online banking had initiated several large transfers, moving money into accounts they couldn't immediately trace. The caller ID on the bank's security footage showed Leo using Eleanor's computer sometime during the night, probably while Clara had been driving home from their confrontation. "How much?" Clara asked, though she dreaded the answer. $37,000 from her savings account, plus he appears to have accessed a line of credit we weren't aware existed. Clara looked at her mother, who was sitting quietly at the kitchen table while their world crumbled around them. Eleanor had built that savings account over 30 years of careful living, putting away small amounts each month for emergencies and grandchildren's educations. Leo had stolen even that modest security in his final desperate act. The second blow came from an unexpected source. Emma appeared at the front door just after noon, holding the hand of a 6-year-old with Leo's dark eyes and his stubborn chin. The little girl, Lily, carried a small purple backpack and looked around Eleanor's living room with the careful attention of a child who'd learned not to take stability for granted. "Is he here?" Emma asked, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "No, we don't know where he is." Clara knelt to Lily's eye level. "Hi, sweetheart. You remember Aunt Clara?" Lily nodded solemnly, then whispered, "Is Daddy in trouble?" The question hit Clara like a physical blow. She looked at Emma, seeing exhaustion and something approaching relief in the younger woman's face. "Emma, Leo called me this morning, said he needed to disappear for a while, that people were looking for him. He wanted to say goodbye to Lily, but She shook her head. "I couldn't let him drag her into whatever mess he's created now." Eleanor spoke from the kitchen doorway. "Bring her here. Let me hold my granddaughter." Clara watched her mother embrace Lily with fierce tenderness, both of them taking comfort from each other while the adult world collapsed around them. The simple interaction,
Grandmother and grandchild finding solace in each other's presence reminded Clara what they were really fighting to protect. He took money from Mom's account last night, probably enough to run for a while. Emma's face hardened. Of course he did. Even when Leo's trying to protect people, he ends up hurting them. She pulled out her phone, showing Clara a text message. He sent this 2 hours ago. The message was typically Leo, apologetic but evasive. Taking care of business so you and Lily can be safe. Don't worry about me. Kiss our girl and tell her daddy loves her. Taking care of business, Clara repeated bitterly. He's probably trying to get to that high-stakes poker game he mentioned, thinking he can still gamble his way out of this.
Detective Morrison looked up from her own phone conversation. We've got his credit card activity. Gas station on I-84 West about 2 hours ago. Looks like he's headed toward the state line. The reality of Leo's flight hit Clara with unexpected force. Despite everything he'd done, despite the theft and lies and manipulation, part of her had still hoped he would stay and face the consequences like an adult. His decision to run felt like a final rejection of everything their family had tried to teach him about responsibility and accountability. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, still holding Lily on her lap. "We continue the investigation," Detective Morrison said. "Interview witnesses, trace the money trail, coordinate with other jurisdictions if necessary. Your son will be charged with embezzlement, elder abuse, insurance fraud, and probably several other felonies once we complete our review." Clara felt Lily's eyes on her face and forced herself to remain calm. "And the business? Our house? That depends on how much we can recover and whether there are any more surprises in your books." Detective Morrison's expression softened slightly. "I've seen families come back from worse, but it takes time and a lot of hard decisions." After the detective left, the house felt hollow despite being full of people. Harold had remained through the police interview, taking notes and making periodic calls to his own lawyer. Marcus arrived in the late afternoon, bringing Sophia with him, both of them looking shell-shocked as Clara explained the situation. "I can't believe Mr. Leo would do this," Marcus said, shaking his head. "He always seemed like he cared about the business, about the people who worked there." "Addiction makes people do things they never thought they'd do," Emma said quietly. She was helping Lily color in a book at the kitchen table, both of them trying to maintain normalcy while the adults discussed Leo's betrayal. "It changes how they think, what they prioritize. The person you knew was real, but the addiction was stronger." Sophia spoke up for the first time since arriving. "What about the workers? People like Marcus who depend on the company for their future?" It was a question Clara had been dreading. Whitmore Construction employed 15 people, most of them local residents who'd been with the company for years. Leo's theft hadn't just damaged their family, it had put other families' livelihoods at risk. "We'll figure it out," Clara said, though she had no idea how. "Maybe restructure, bring in a partner, find a way to keep everyone employed while we rebuild." Harold cleared his throat. "My offer still stands, different terms now, given the circumstances, but I could absorb the debts and maintain the workforce." Clara looked around the room, at her mother holding her granddaughter, at Marcus and Sophia representing the community that would be affected by whatever decisions got made, at Emma who was modeling the courage required to protect what mattered most, even when it meant letting someone you loved face consequences. "Let me think about it," Clara said finally. As evening approached and people began to leave, Clara found herself alone with Eleanor and Lily. The little girl had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by a day of adult conversations she didn't fully understand, but could sense were important. "He's not coming back, is he?" Eleanor said quietly. Clara wanted to lie, to offer some hope that Leo would realize his mistake and return to his face's responsibilities. But she thought about the desperate certainty in his voice when he talked about the poker game, about his unshakable belief that one more bet could fix everything. "No, Mom, I don't think he is." Eleanor nodded, her hand stroking Lily's dark hair. "Then we move forward without him. We protect what's left and rebuild what we can." She looked at Clara with clear, determined eyes. "Your father didn't build this business so it could die with one person's mistakes. We find a way to save it." Outside, darkness was falling over the small town where 3 generations of Whitmores had built their lives. Somewhere in that darkness, Leo was driving toward what he probably thought was salvation, but was more likely another kind of destruction.
And here, in the house where it all began, the people he'd left behind were learning to imagine a future that didn't include him. It was the hardest lesson any family could learn, that sometimes love meant letting go completely, even when every instinct screamed to keep holding on. 3 days after Leo's disappearance, Clara sat in the sterile conference room of Brennan and Associates, surrounded by lawyers who spoke in measured tones about asset recovery and criminal restitution. The fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh relief: the stacks of financial documents, the grim faces of the legal team, and the reality of just how deep Leo's destruction had reached. The good news is that most of the stolen funds can be traced. The bad news is that tracing them doesn't guarantee recovery. Your brother appears to have moved money through several gambling platforms, cryptocurrency exchanges, and what our forensic accountant describes as high-risk investments. Clara rubbed her temples, fighting the headache that had become her constant companion. How much can we actually get back?
Maybe 40%, if we're lucky. The house loans are more complicated. Since your mother's signature was forged, we can challenge them, but that process could take months and cost more in legal fees than the recovery amount. Across the table, Harold shifted in his chair. He'd insisted on attending these meetings as a concerned family member, but Clara suspected he was really here to assess how desperate they were becoming. His buyout offer had changed 3 times since Leo's crimes became public, each iteration less favorable as their bargaining position weakened. There's also the matter of criminal restitution, continued Frank Morrison, the prosecutor assigned to Leo's case. If he's caught and convicted, the court can order repayment, but that assumes he'll have assets to seize. Right now, he's effectively judgment-proof. Clara thought about Leo somewhere out there, probably still convinced he could win back enough money to fix everything. The police had tracked his movements to a casino in Nevada, then lost his trail when he'd apparently switched to cash transactions. For all they knew, he was broke and sleeping in his truck. Or he'd hit a lucky streak and was planning his next disastrous bet. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, and Clara drove home through a town that felt different now. People stared at her car as she passed, some with sympathy, others with the calculating look of those wondering if Whitmore Construction would survive long enough to finish their projects. The scandal had leaked quickly. Small towns had efficient gossip networks, and a family business imploding over gambling debts and embezzlement was too juicy to keep quiet. At the office, Clara found Marcus organizing files, with the methodical precision of someone trying to impose order on chaos. He'd taken on additional responsibilities without being asked, staying late to reconcile accounts and call suppliers about delayed payments. At 17, he was showing more maturity than some adults Clara knew. The Henderson project is behind schedule. Without Leo managing the crew supervision, things have gotten disorganized. Mr. Henderson called this morning asking about the delay. Clara nodded, adding Henderson to her growing list of clients who needed personal attention and careful explanations. What about the Ramirez House edition? Mrs. Garcia wants to know if she should keep paying us or hire someone else to finish the work. Marcus hesitated. Clara, people are scared. They're worried about putting money into a company that might not be around next month. The weight of other people's livelihoods pressed down on Clara's shoulders. Every delayed project meant workers going unpaid, families struggling to meet their own obligations. Leo's addiction hadn't just destroyed their family, it had created ripples that touched every corner of their small community. Sophia appeared in the doorway, still in her hospital scrubs from her morning shift. Marcus, Mom wants you home for lunch. She looked at Clara with something approaching sympathy. How are you holding up? I'm managing. It was the answer Clara gave everyone, though managing felt like an understatement for the constant juggling of crises, legal meetings, and impossible decisions. People are talking, Sophia said bluntly. Some are saying you should have known what Leo was doing, that you're as responsible as he is for the mess. The words stung because they echoed Clara's own guilt. How had she missed the signs? How had Leo stolen $200,000 while she was supposedly managing the business? Should she have paid closer attention to the financial details instead of trusting her brother to handle accounts payable? But most people know better, Sophia continued. They know you've been working 16-hour days trying to keep the company alive, trying to make sure everyone gets paid even when there's no money left. That matters to people like us. After the Ramirez siblings left, Clara sat alone in the office that felt too big without Leo's presence. His desk remained exactly as he'd left it, coffee cup still holding cold dregs, family photos facing outward so clients could see his happy domesticity, promotional materials for construction equipment he'd been planning to purchase before his world collapsed. Her phone buzzed with a text from the nursing home where Eleanor had been staying since suffering what the doctors diplomatically called an episode 2 days earlier. The stress of Leo's betrayal and the constant stream of legal meetings had triggered a rapid decline in her condition, leaving her confused and occasionally combative with staff. "Your mother is asking for Leo again. Should we explain the situation or redirect her attention?" Clara closed her eyes, trying to decide which approach would cause Eleanor less pain. The truth that would hurt fresh each time she forgot it, or gentle lies that preserved her peace. It was another impossible choice in a string of decisions where every option carried unacceptable costs. The office phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Tom, Morrison, from the auto shop. Clara, sorry to bother you, but I wanted to let you know. Someone came by asking about your dad's Mustang. Said he was interested in buying the wreck for parts. Someone local? Didn't recognize him. Paid cash for contact information, though. Left me wondering if there's something about that car I don't know." Clara felt a chill of unease. The Mustang represented the last physical evidence of Leo's staged crash, the vehicle that contained the dashcam footage proving his fraud. If someone was trying to purchase the wreck, it suggested Leo had made contact with people who wanted to eliminate that evidence. She was still pondering the implications when Harold knocked on the office door. He entered without waiting for permission, his presumptuous familiarity as irritating as ever. "Clara, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the business."
Have you? Clara didn't look up from the invoices she was reviewing. Given the current circumstances, the legal issues, the community concerns, the cash flow problems, I think it's time to be realistic about your options. Harold settled into the chair across from her desk. My offer could solve most of your immediate problems. Clara finally looked at him, seeing the calculation behind his concerned expression. And what would happen to the employees? To the clients with half-finished projects? I'd honor existing contracts and maintain the workforce, of course, assuming they meet my operational standards. The qualification was telling. Harold would keep the profitable workers and projects while discarding anything that didn't serve his interests. Men like Marcus, young and still learning, would probably be among the first to go. I need more time to consider all the options, Clara said. Harold's smile was patient but predatory. Of course. Though I should mention my offer has an expiration date. Market conditions change, and the longer this situation remains unresolved, the less attractive the investment becomes. After he left, Clara sat in the growing darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the building settling around her. This office had been her father's dream made real, the headquarters of a business built through honest work and community relationships. Now it felt like a mausoleum, filled with the ghosts of better times when families stayed together and trust wasn't a luxury they couldn't afford. Her phone rang again. Emma, calling with an update on Lily's adjustment to staying with Eleanor's sister in the next town. The little girl was asking when Daddy was coming home, not understanding why grown-ups got sad when she mentioned him. How do we explain this to her? Emma asked. How do we tell a 6-year-old that her father chose his addiction over his family? Clara didn't have an answer for that either. She was learning that recovery from betrayal wasn't just about rebuilding finances or business relationships. It was about reconstructing the basic assumptions that made daily life possible. Things like trust, predictability, the belief that people you love won't deliberately hurt you. Outside her office window, the town spread out in familiar patterns of light and shadow. Somewhere in that grid of streets were families wondering if their paychecks would clear, clients questioning whether to find new contractors, community members trying to decide if the Whitmore name still meant something worth preserving. Clara realized she was no longer just managing a family crisis. She was fighting for the survival of everything her father had built,
everything that connected their name to 30 years of honest work and community trust. The question wasn't whether she could save it all, but whether she could save enough to matter. 6 months later, Clara stood in Tom Morrison's garage, running her fingers along the pristine cherry-red paint of her father's restored Mustang. The car looked better than it had in years, every dent hammered out, every scratch buffed away, the chrome bumper gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Tom had worked on it during slow periods, refusing payment beyond the cost of parts. "She's ready to go home," Tom said, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag. "Runs like a dream now. Your dad would be proud." Clara traced the familiar curve of the hood, remembering Saturday mornings when she'd held flashlights while Dad tinkered with the engine. The car had always been more than transportation. It was proof that broken things could be made whole again with enough patience and care. "The dashcam's still in there," Tom added. "Figured you might want to keep it, given everything that happened." Clara nodded, though she doubted she'd ever watch that footage again. Some truths only needed to be learned once. The drive back to the office took her through downtown, past the new sign that read, Whitmore Construction. The partnership with Harold was Clara's compromise with reality. She couldn't rebuild alone, but she'd refused to let him simply absorb Dad's business. The negotiated agreement gave him 40% ownership in exchange for capital injection and debt assumption, while Clara retained operational control and the authority to protect employees like Marcus. It hadn't been easy. Harold pushed for efficiency improvements that usually meant cutting corners or eliminating jobs. Clara pushed back, insisting that Whitmore quality meant something worth preserving. They'd found an uneasy balance that kept the business profitable while maintaining the community relationships Dad had spent decades building. The office buzzed with controlled activity when Clara arrived. Marcus was at the reception desk scheduling appointments with the confident professionalism of someone who'd grown up fast over the past 6 months. At 18 now, he'd finished high school early and taken on increasing responsibilities, proving himself capable of managing complex projects under Clara's guidance. "Mrs. Henderson called about the kitchen renovation. She wants to expand the scope to include the bathroom. I told you you'd call back with a timeline and estimate." Clara smiled at his matter-of-fact tone. Marcus had lost the starstruck idealism he'd once carried about the Whitmore family, but he'd gained something more valuable, realistic confidence in his own abilities and judgment. The scandal had taught him that adults were fallible, but it had also shown him that good people found ways to rebuild after disasters. "Any word from the prosecutor's office?" Clara asked. "Leo's sentencing hearing is scheduled for next week. Mr. Morrison said they expect him to get 3 to 5 years, depending on his cooperation with restitution efforts." Leo had been arrested in California 2 months earlier, found sleeping in his truck outside a casino where he'd lost the last of Eleanor's stolen money. The gambling addiction treatment he'd started in county jail gave him enough clarity to cooperate with authorities, providing information about other accounts and helping trace some of the missing funds. It wasn't redemption exactly, but it was the beginning of accountability. Clara drove to Sunset Manor for her daily visit with Eleanor.
The assisted living facility was nicer than most, with gardens that reminded residents of home and staff trained to work with memory issues. Eleanor's condition had stabilized after the initial crisis, settling into a pattern of good days and confused ones that had become their new normal. Today was a good day. Eleanor sat in her favorite chair by the window, reading a romance novel with the focused attention she'd always brought to her hobbies. She looked up when Clara entered, her smile carrying genuine recognition and warmth. "Clara, sweetheart, how's the business?" "Growing," Clara said, settling into the visitor's chair. "We landed the new municipal building project. 3 years of steady work if we do it right." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Your father always said government contracts were the foundation of any solid construction business. Boring but reliable." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "Any news about Leo?" This was the difficult part of Eleanor's good days. She remembered enough to know her son was in trouble, but the details sometimes shifted or disappeared entirely. Clara had learned to give simple, honest answers without overwhelming her with information she might not retain. "He's getting help for his gambling problem. It'll take time, but he's working on it." "Good." Eleanor's response was matter-of-fact, carrying the practical acceptance of someone who'd survived enough hardships to know that some problems took years to resolve. "He needs to learn that you can't fix mistakes by making bigger mistakes." After the visit, Clara drove to Emma's new house, a modest rental in a safe neighborhood where Lila could ride her bike without supervision. Emma had rebuilt her life with the same methodical determination she brought to her nursing work, creating stability through routine and clear boundaries. Lily was in the backyard when Clara arrived, practicing cartwheels with the single-minded focus of childhood. At 7 now, she'd grown taller and more serious, but she still lit up when she saw her aunt. "Aunt Clara, watch this!" Lily demonstrated a nearly perfect cartwheel, landing with arms raised in triumph. "Impressive," Clara said, meaning it. "Better than I could do at your age." Emma appeared on the back porch carrying glasses of lemonade. "How was the sentencing meeting?" "Postponed again. Leo's lawyer is still negotiating restitution terms." Clara accepted the cold drink gratefully. "How is she handling everything?" "Better than I expected. Kids are resilient, especially when the adults around them are honest about what's happening." Emma glanced at Lily, who was now teaching herself to do handstands against the fence. "She knows Daddy made bad choices and has to face consequences. She also knows it wasn't her fault and that she's safe now." As evening approached, Clara found herself back at the office, not because she had to be there, but because the building had become a refuge from the complexity of rebuilding her life. She was learning to differentiate between being responsible for her family's welfare and being responsible for everyone else's choices, a distinction that was harder to maintain than it sounded. Her personal life was slowly expanding beyond crisis management. She'd started dating again, cautiously, with a divorced teacher named David, who understood that some evenings she needed to work late and some weekends she had to visit her mother. He didn't pressure her to move faster than felt comfortable, and he didn't seem intimidated by the complications of her situation. The Mustang sat in the parking lot, its restored beauty a testament to the possibility of renewal. Clara had considered selling it after the accident, thinking the memories were too painful to preserve. But seeing it whole again reminded her that some things were worth the effort required to repair them properly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Finished the Henderson estimate. Sent it to your email for review. Thanks for trusting me with the big projects." Clara smiled, thinking about the 18-year-old who'd walked into our office 2 years ago, eager to learn construction work and improve his family's situation. Marcus represented something Leo had never quite achieved: the ability to accept responsibility without being consumed by it, to learn from mistakes without being defined by them. She started the Mustang and rolled down the windows, letting the evening air carry the familiar sense of sawdust and summer heat through the car. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: a business to run, a mother to visit, a community to serve. But tonight, driving through the town where 3 generations of Whitmores had built their lives, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in months: cautious optimism about the future. The road ahead wasn't clear or easy, but it was hers to navigate. And sometimes, after everything fell apart, that sense of agency, the knowledge that you could choose how to rebuild, was enough to make the journey feel like progress rather than just survival. Leo's choices had broken their family, but they hadn't destroyed it. The difference between those two outcomes, Clara was learning, lay in the daily decision to keep moving forward, one honest conversation and carefully kept promise at a time.